He's looking good.
Don't let anybody hit him under any circumstances. In the meantime,
Smith looked really good.
Our next stop is Philadelphia, where Saquon Barkley obviously was the big addition of the offseason after the total collapse in the second half of last season. The questions are, will Jalen Hurts reemerge as an MVP-type player? Will Saquon play a role in that? Dominique Foxworth was with us yesterday. He is very optimistic about the Eagles. Listen.
I think the Eagles are the best team in the NFC, and I think that they should be the front runners to win the NFC next year. Their biggest issue last year was coordinators, and they've addressed that. I think they have all the tools they need as long as they can coordinate the offense and defense to the above average level. They have a talent to be the best team in the NFC.
Big statement, but it doesn't make no sense. That's terrible English, but you understand what I mean by that. Tim Hasselbeck. If the answer somehow, Dan Graziano seems to be in the dark. Dan, if we lost power in West Virginia this morning,
yeah,
are we okay?
the light went off on a thing. I wish it had happened during the break. I could have fixed it.
It's okay.
Maybe.
We can see you. We can see you. All
I'll
is
work
well.
on it.
Tim Hasselbeck, the Eagles. Dominique Foxworth thinks they have a chance to be the best team in the NFC this year. How good do you think they can be?
Yeah, I think that's a very fair statement by Dominique. Look, they wouldn't be my choice. I think the coordinator drama from a year ago was real. They did address it. They rebooted at coordinator. So this is 2 years in a row that they've done that. And so those guys and the adjustment to that, I think, could impact their football team. Obviously, the addition of that guy, Saquon Barkley, could mean a lot. But I look at a team like the Detroit Lions as a team that just like their chemistry, I like the continuity, I like their roster. And so while Philadelphia is going to be really good, my pick at the moment would be the Detroit Lions.
And the Lions obviously were 30 minutes from the Super Bowl last year. The Eagles were in the Super Bowl the year before. If the answers come back yes, and those coordinators, by the way, are Kellen Moore on the offensive side and Vic Fangio, some sort of a legendary figure on the defensive side. Do they restore? Because that team, something went right there, right? I mean, something was really, really wrong over the last 2 months of last season. Do they get that part of it figured out?
I don't think so. I think they'll have a successful season. I think they'll win the East. But I'm with Tim. I believe in the Detroit Lions. And, last year we had major concerns about their defense. They go out and get DJ Reader, who I think solidifies that. They go get Marcus Davenport on the opposite side of Aiden Hutchinson. They go out and get Carlton Davis, and they draft Teron Arnold. So I think they solidify, and everybody's happy over there, right? You talk about continuity, chemistry. They've been together for a long time. One thing we don't have to worry about is the quarterback and coach relationship.
You worry about that in Philly?
I do, because, both sides have addressed it. Sirianni and also Jalen Hurts addressed it in his press conference about, they don't have the best relationship. And when have you seen a successful team with sustained success have a bad relationship between coach and quarterback? That usually works hand in hand. They're usually tied at the hip, and they will be tied at the hip. Once again, Kellen Moore coming in, Vic Fangio, who I've had a tremendous experience with, but Kellen Moore, Dak Prescott threw a lot of turnovers. It wasn't about the plays, it was about the turnovers of Jalen Hurts last year.
Graziano, what do you think? The psychological piece of all this, or whatever it is I'm trying to get at here. They've got a lot of really good players. They didn't play really well as the season went on last year. Do they going to get that part of it fixed?
You're being kind. They were horrendous over the final 7 games of their season, 8 games of their season, you count the playoffs. Look, if the Cubs were the problem, as Dominique thinks they were, then we're going to find out, because they'll snap right back to it and they'll be a Super Bowl contender again. They were 10-1 at one point last year with those coordinators. So something happened, and it's still basically the same group that really kind of shut down over the final couple of months, minus 2 key veteran leaders in Jason Kelce and Fletcher Cox. So I need to see the Eagles rebound before I'm going to believe it. Yes, they have a talented roster. Yes, they should be good. Yes, Jalen Hurts was playing hurt and should be better this year. But something happened there in the last couple of months of last season, and I don't think we should ignore it as we assess what kind of team we expect them to be this year.
All right, bro, looking like he just got out of the hospital. All right, listen. Let's be clear here, all right? This idea that the Eagles were this great team, they were 10-1, and then something happened, and they shut down, and therefore they're just not a good team because it's the same group, and there we go, is just an inaccurate assessment. First off, let me say that I do believe that the Eagles will be one of the best teams in the NFC, in the NFL. I think they have a top roster. I believe in the coordinators, and I believe that this team will be a legitimate threat to win the Super Bowl. No question in my mind. But this idea, I really reject this idea that this team was this great team last season and they were able to, that they then just fell apart. And someone said in the comments in a previous Eagles video, well, you are what your record shows. And it's like, yes and no. If it was that simple, if those things were that straightforward, betting and gambling would be the easiest thing in the history of the world. We would all be billionaires. If all we did was have to look at a record and say, this team's 10-1, they're obviously a great team and they're going to win, we'd all be billionaire gamblers. That's not how it works. You have to look beyond numbers. You have to look beyond wins and losses. You have to actually watch the game and understand what you're also seeing and how these games are unfolding. The truth of the matter is that the Eagles were just getting by. In that 10-1 record, they were just getting by. They could have lost to the Commanders multiple times. They could have lost to the Patriots, the Vikings. I'm not going to remember every single team right now. The Kansas City Chiefs. Look, those were all losable games. You could come with the argument that says, well, they found a way to win. But I definitely look at games through the lens of, I try to reduce something as who won that game versus who lost the game. And the truth is that the Eagles during that run, a lot of teams lost that game rather than the Eagles winning that game. And that matters. That matters. That made the Eagles significantly more fragile. Okay? And so I don't think that the Eagles then just magically fell apart. They just were no longer able to get by what they were able to get by on. And I do think that it was like, because it was very obvious when you were watching those games that the Eagles were just not the same Eagles, even though they were winning and finding ways to win. Because people then try to say, well, you could say that about every game. And it's like, you can and you can't. You can stack up all the reasons why a team wins or loses, and then you add up the math and say, okay, more things happened on this side than that side. Therefore, this team more won the game than lost the game. Because yes, you're right. You can always point out, well, hey, that fumble, they didn't fumble. But it's just like, yeah, you have to honestly look beyond all of it and try to make sense. It's both an art and a science. It's never just like, always just 1 + 1 = 2. It's like 1 + 1 equals a cursive 2. And so it's just, you have to know what you're seeing. And so to me, it was just very clear that was a fundamental problem with the Eagles, was that they were never really getting it together, even though they were winning those games, right? And the team knew it. And so this idea, well, hey, they went 10-1 with those coordinators, so clearly those coordinators aren't the problem. It's like, it's just an absurd statement to make. From my viewpoint, it's very obvious that the coordinators were a fundamental issue. And not only now did they significantly upgrade, because then I also reject Dak Prescott through interceptions because, and Kellen Moore was the coordinator. And it's like what? We're now blaming Kellen Moore for that? Like, I don't know if that's necessarily fair, because Dak Prescott and the Cowboys also won 12 games and had great numbers and MVP candidate seasons and all of that, and yet we're just going to then highlight turnovers by Dak Prescott and put that all on Kellen Moore. Like, that's not necessarily fair at all. And I think turnovers can sometimes be a coordinator's issue, because they're either not helping their quarterback, they're either not putting their quarterback in a better position to succeed, or helping him simplify decision making, or the team is constantly behind and you're asking your quarterback to throw the ball 50 times a game. And so of course you're going to throw interceptions. Josh Allen comes to mind. And I just don't think that was necessarily what Kellen Moore did for Dak Prescott. So I just don't really think that that's really inherently fair to just drop that on Kellen Moore's plate. And therefore now Jalen Hurts is not going to reduce his interceptions. Like, it's just, you're stretching this too far. It just seems silly to me. But again, the Eagles not only upgraded from coordinating, but then they also got other weapons. They upgraded both defensively and offensively. So they didn't just, like, when he says that this is just the same core, relatively the same team, it's just not wholeheartedly accurate. Like, I think even the names that they have down here, and I won't be able to remember all the names off the top of my head. But they obviously got Saquon. They obviously got Garner Johnson. They obviously got Mitchell. Yes, they lost Kelsey, but they've been setting up for his replacement for years now. And again, they lost DeAndre Swift, but they upgraded with Saquon Barkley. Like, what are we talking about? And we essentially just replaced Reddick as well, right? Like, we didn't just lose some of these players and now have it just be like, oh, great, we're now at a deficit. We got their replacements either upgraded or got their relative equivalent. So again, it's just like you can't look at the roster and say that they didn't get better. And that's why the Eagles have already been voted as, I think, the second best roster in the NFL. I think only second to the 49ers, if memory serves me correctly. So, and again, you got Vic Fangio. Yes, a legendary defensive coordinator. And our defense was bonkers last year. Bonkers. Nobody knew what was going on defense. Bonkers. And Brian Johnson was a terrible coordinator. A terrible coordinator. People are so afraid to say these things because I think of political reasons, quite honestly, and which is very frustrating. He was not a good coordinator. He was not a good coordinator. And let's not blow this out of proportion of the issues that Sirianni and Jalen Hurts has. They lost a Super Bowl together. When you lose a Super Bowl, that always causes some issues. Right? Especially when you're that close to winning, it's just, relationships can kind of have some friction. But this idea that there's like this massive fracture between Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni, I think is completely overblown. Not to mention, Nick Sirianni isn't the main offensive brains in the building. So it doesn't even matter as much. That's why Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, even though they had a very cold relationship together, they were able to be very successful because Bill Belichick was not running that offense. He wasn't meeting with Tom Brady every 5 seconds. When you have like an Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes relationship where they are sitting butt to butt on the bench, yes, it's very important that they get along because that is how it works. But when Jalen Hurts, finishes a drive and goes off to the sideline, he's going to his coordinator. He's talking to Shane Steichen. He's talking to Kellen Moore. He's not running to Sirianni. So it's just different. Again, Shanahan is talking to Purdy constantly. McVay is constantly talking to Stafford. Sirianni doesn't have that relationship with his team because he's not that type of quarterback, because he's not that coach. So it's that simple. I don't think we have to complicate it any more than that. So it is funny to hear some of these people. Again, if you want to doubt the Eagles, by all means, doubt them. Or if you want to say, listen, I don't think that they're as good, that's fine. But you have to give better reasons than just, this team is pretty much the same team, which is false. And their coordinators proved to be pretty good because they were 10-1, which is false. And therefore, I think they're just not going to be that good this year. And it's like, that's some seriously flawed logic. So you got to bring better information than that. But those are just my thoughts. I would absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think? Do you think that the Eagles are set up to be the best team in the NFC or one of the best teams in the NFC or just in the NFL as a whole? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment. So whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions. Let's get in some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and I would absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to. Something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much, and see you next time.